HRN listeners. As we celebrate our 15th year, we are deepening our commitment to giving voice to the next generation of food systems storytellers, and we need your help. Our internship and fellowship programs help activate new possibilities for underrepresented and underestimated young people through experiential journalism, audio engineering, and production training. Through these unique programs, HRN helps food equity stewards build essential workforce readiness skills that expand their potential and foster economic mobility. Please consider supporting these critical programs. And with a minimum donation, you can be entered to win a dinner for two at an amazing restaurant in one of 8 cities and tickets to a concert at a great venue in one of those cities. We have incredible partners across the country who have donated, as they also share our passion for helping to educate the next generation of food systems storytellers. Check out heritageradionetwork.org/15 to donate and enter to win today. That's heritageradionetwork.org/15 to donate and enter to win today. And make sure you donate before March 31st. Thank you.
Hearst Ranch is a proud sponsor of the Heritage Radio Network. Learn more about Hearst Ranch at HearstRanch.com.
This week on Meat and Three, we're looking at factors that will shape our food world in 2019. We start with trend predictions and how media covers them.
A website could theoretically devote all their coverage to these viral trends and get all sorts of hits. That's not a way to build sustainable readerships, just as it's not a way to build sustainable restaurants.
We report on a big change coming and how street meat will be served.
On January 1st, a ban on plastic foam went into effect in New York City.
And we round out the episode with a story about using gene editing to create the spicy tomato of the future.
At first, it sounds like a gimmick or like something that you would do for fun. The truth is, there is a real value behind it.
It's not too late to make your resolution. Subscribe to Meat and Three wherever you listen to podcasts so you don't miss a single episode this year.
Welcome to the Grape Nation, your weekly wine journey. Our guest is Scott Woltz. We'll talk to Scott about Italian wines, Spanish wines, being Assam, Babbo, and a lot more. A lot to cover. We'll taste an Aglianico for our weekly wine sip. I'm your host, Sam Ben-Ruby. Stay with us for the Grape Nation on the Heritage Radio Network. We bring wine to the people. All right, Scott Woltz, Washington, D.C. born, yes, correct? Sir. And an aspiring actor. Scott made his way to New York City, bagged the acting, worked with Tom Colicchio, 11 Madison Park in La Serena. More importantly, Scott had a heck of a year last year. Let's talk about that. He was named Best New Sommelier by Wine and Spirits for 2018. He earned his advanced pin in the Court of the Master Sommeliers, and he was a runner-up in the 2018 Ruinart Challenge. But most importantly, and he won't fight me on this, he had his first child last year. Scott is currently the wine director at Babbo in New York City. Welcome to the Grape Nation, Scott.
Thank you, Sam. Excited to be here.
Did I get that intro correct?
Absolutely.
All right.
Especially the end. Absolutely.
Okay. All right. I want people to know who I'm sitting with, so yeah. I ask everyone, are our mics okay? Good. I ask everyone to give us a little background on your journey in life and wine, because this is a wine show that got you currently to Babbo. Now, don't spend the whole show on it, but just, take me through.
You cut me off when I go too long.
All right.
Yeah, I mean, you mentioned the acting, which is definitely something that brought me to New York. I grew up a military brat, so I moved all over the world with my family, my parents, and brother and sister. And And I think, a lot of kids I watched a lot of kids have a hard time kind of living the military brat life and, picking up and moving out. And I never really had that difficulty. I think part of it was I was really good at picking up friends by trying to entertain and as much as possible with whatever I could do. Couple that with the fact that my dad's always, and I think I definitely took this on, maybe it's in our genes, but I've been someone who's obsessed with something for short periods of time, short period obsessions, if you will. So, my dad was someone who, picked up skiing and then became a ski instructor. He picked up sailing. He was a sail instructor. He was in scouts. He was in genealogy. He,
Talented guy.
little league coach. Like always had his hands dabbling. He was an actor for a period of time too. Like always had his hands dabbling in something. And I think I picked that up also. So I would become very kind of obsessed with being good at things. And so that was one thing that kind of got me going into the career I am in now. And then on top of that, the acting. So I always wanted to entertain people, and I think that goes back to the, you live somewhere for a year or two, and then you have to pick up a whole new friend. So what do? I was
Put a little show on.
a little, yeah, and believe me, I did. Like in some ways, in a nerdy way, I dabbled in doing little magic shows for my friends, and then did little skits, and I got into acting, and then later got into stage acting, and always wanted to teach, and I did that for a while. So I went to undergrad for theater, did the regional theater thing. That's where I met my wife. Went to grad school, taught theater for a while, and
So you were pretty deep.
oh yeah, very deep.
When
it
did you
was
come
like
to
this
New
is technically a second career almost.
Yeah, right.
2009 was when I moved here, so I'm almost coming up on my 10 years.
But when you came in '09, you came with aspirations to act.
It's funny,
or-
actually. I would say yes then, and yet looking back on it now, I think I was done by the time I moved to New York, which is really weird. Yeah, I think getting out of grad school, and I was, like I said, I like being good at things, and I was aware that both acting and singing and directing, I was always good at, but I was never the best. And so I realized if I couldn't be the best outside of New York, what am I moving to New York for? So I think I moved to New York because I really wanted to live in New York City. And so when I moved here, as I've been in restaurants my entire life, so that was what I knew. And I think I, for a couple of years still dabbled in the acting thing, but really knew that that was behind me.
So let's talk about from '09 to now, the restaurant path you took,
Sure.
and how that pulled you into
Yeah.
the whole wine world.
So I again, like I said, I always had something that I like putting on a show. I like entertaining. I like seeing people smile and happy, and that I think is the connection there. So which at some point acting was a means to an end. I'm sorry, waiting tables was a means to an end for acting. It really just reversed. And it started becoming, my wife and I, you save up your money for a month to go see a Broadway show. We're saving up our money, and instead of going to see a Broadway show, we're eating at La Bernardin, And so all of a sudden we're like, oh, we
It's a
get
show in
it
its own
literally
way.
is a dinner and a show,
Yeah.
and for me,
That's what was important. to you.
exactly. And it was, so we found, we were going to Times Square, but not seeing shows. We're going to see Eric Repair. And then moved into Per Se. And so while I was working for the first 2 years and still thinking about if I was acting, I was working at, a seafood house for 2 years that was, in Times Square and doing well, but I realized I wanted to do more in the restaurant industry. So I jumped over to Colicchio & Sons. I think like a lot of us, especially before I was really knowledgeable about the restaurant industry, I was like, well, Tom Colicchio is a big name.
Sure.
I've heard of him. So
Was
let's,
that when he was down on West Chelsea?
Yeah, so
18,
right
19?
next to Del Posto. Yeah,
Right there.
Which is now Joe Robuchon. But
Right.
originally Kraft Steak, then moved into Colicchio & Sons. And it was my first dabble into a restaurant that was trying to be someone. They were still fairly new. They
Right.
got their 3-star review in the New York Times, and beautiful restaurant, and really trying to do everything that, the 4-star restaurants were trying to do on a really high level. But it was also, you don't make mistakes there. And that was the first time where I was like, I worked in restaurants where you make a mistake, the manager's like, hey, you made a mistake, and you walk
Yeah,
away.
this is the big
No,
leagues.
that's not how it works here. Yeah, this is the big leagues.
So you're there how long?
Not even a year, not very long, but it was instrumental in me going, in understanding this is what a
raised
restaurant
your
does.
awareness to the level of
And I got to meet
hospitality should be.
I got to meet some great people. Thomas Pasterzak was a short time the wine director when I got there, and then R squared. Ryan, yeah, thank you. Ryan was the wine director during my time there, and a number of people that were really, really great.
Right, so good people. So you leave there and go where?
11 Madison. So really,
but you don't go to. We're not into wine yet, right? You go to 11 Madison.
I mean,
as
we're
a
into
captain.
wine. I remember sitting at a table with Ryan during one of his wine classes, and people were talking about wine the way that we do now, and thinking like, I remember the idea, and I still talk to new wine drinkers to this day about it. What does this taste and smell like? And all I could say is it tastes and smells like grapes. It smells like wine. Like that general, like, you can't get past the idea of what it is.
Yeah.
The transition to 11 Madison was that I, in one of the number of dinners that my wife and I did, I brought her to 11 Madison for her birthday. And my mind exploded. Like, really, it was...
Was that still Danny Meyer then?
No, it had just crossed over into Will and Daniel, yeah. And they were putting on a show. And for me, it was like not kitschy. Some people will say that, but it was not kitschy. It was purely about enjoyment of the guest.
So true. How did you get the job there? You pursued them because it was...
Well, I sneakily pursued them. Like, they had random open calls, and I showed up to an open call, but I had been pursuing them before that,
And you weren't even thinking wine, right? You were
I was thinking I wanted to just be at the top restaurant in the world.
So what year was that?
2012.
So 2012, you spend 4 years there.
Yeah.
Any wine shift while you...
That was my wine shift.
That was.
Oh, I mean...
But you went there as a captain.
Oh, I went there as a...
But you had this hunger for wine knowledge?
So no, you go there at the bottom. Everyone, manager, somm, everyone there starts at the bottom.
Right.
And to me, that's remarkable that, you can have somebody with an idea where you go, no matter what level of experience you have, you're starting at the bottom. So for me, I started at the bottom, worked my way up over a period of 4 years, was a captain there. It was, first and foremost, it was a PhD in hospitality. It was a PhD in taking care of people. And then it also started my love of wine. Because again, you have to know so much on any given night. And I got to work with Dustin Wilson, who was my first mentor, and then everyone beneath him, who were, at this time, a number of master somms. Any one of those sommeliers could be winning the best wine program in this city, and they're working there as sommeliers because that is the most elite team. To this day, with Cedric running it, is still
I agree. Both Cedric and Dustin have been on the show.
Yeah.
So you spend 4 years there. Why do you leave?
It was a little bit of like, okay, I love the company. I can see myself, even to this day, going back and working with that company in a different spot. But you needed to kind of open your wings and fly. And especially, I did finally get to a point where I wanted to be wine focused.
Right. And it wasn't happening right when you wanted it.
Well, no, I never asked. I didn't expect it. There was never a thought of doing it at 11 Madison for me. And I think it was really just the fact that you don't start as a sommelier there. You need a sommelier job.
So that's you leave there to go to
2016. I go to
La Serena, an opening.
Yeah. So my focus was, I've always believed in the very, very strongly. I think it comes from my growing up with my father, like a mentor game, somebody who you're looking up to and you want to learn from. And so Dustin, and I can name a list of sommeliers at 11 Madison that all were my mentors. Then I was looking for the next one. And so for me, I looked at a bunch of different places, some places that were willing to throw out wine director jobs, and I'll be honest, I've never even met a sommelier.
Why did the La Serena job make sense?
So I met up with a gentleman named Luke Boland, who was opening the restaurant as the wine director, and he had worked at Del Posto and various other spots. And we met, and I sat with him, and I thought, this guy has the direction that I'm kind of going in towards. And then, on top of that, met with Jeff Porter, and I don't know anyone who meets Jeff Porter and goes, I don't want to work. Like, I have to work for this guy.
So it was the best people, the best opportunity.
I could see, and it's one of the best moves I made, and I could see the trajectory and how these people would raise me up.
So You go to La Serena, which is, like I said, Bastianich and Batali.
Mm-hmm.
You go there to open it. First restaurant they open in a dozen years or
10
so.
years, yeah.
And it closes down.
Yeah,
in how long?
it's sad in 2 years.
So you stay with the company and
Or three
just
years.
give me the timeline. You go to Babbo, which is an institution.
Yeah.
When was that?
So we opened the restaurant in 2016 of February. Really the most beautiful restaurant I've seen. I still,
Very
to
cool.
this day,
In the
believe.
Maritime Hotel?
Yeah, just really, really beautiful. I mean, the difficulty in a spot like that, and there, the place before us struggled with it, and I'm curious to see where it goes from now. But the place was just big, and so on any given night, you could do 600 covers, or you could do 6D.
Yeah.
And so to staff something like that and to stay on top, like I think in some ways, I always thought about this, the possibility of them being like the Italian Balthazar, and yet.
Right.
It was, and there were nights that it felt like that.
Yeah.
But then there were nights that I wasn't, and the struggling.
So they
New York City is tough.
They close it down.
Mm-hmm.
You go to Babbo. We'll talk about that in a few minutes.
Yeah, I've already realized that as we've been talking, this is the trajectory of restaurants I go into most often close before right after.
Oh wow, 11 Madison.
I've got
still there.
Colicchio and Sons.
No.
I got Serena. I'm like, something's.
When I was
the
looking
resume
at
builder.
when I was looking at the notes, I didn't even think that. Like this guy's the kiss of death. Nothing like because the business is so.
No, I mean I'm lucky. I got EMP.
It's so volatile, the business.
If EMP and Babbo closed, then definitely something's going on.
I'll give you that. All right, so you've been in New York about 10 years.
Yeah.
All right. So in the 10 years you've been here, and you're not a New Yorker, but now you're a New Yorker, what are, the biggest changes you've seen pretty much in the wine and the restaurant world? Are there one or two things that, really have...
Yeah, I think the biggest thing is guest knowledge. I think it's amazing. I mean, you get guests on any night that you're like, I could hire you as a junior somm right now. Like their knowledge of wine, New York's, and I have not worked outside of New York, so I don't know. But
I would think New York is pretty well educated.
I would make that guess also.
But so a guy comes in and just his knowledge or interest.
Yeah, and he asked me for Schiappettino, and I'm like, I know
And
somms
he can
that don't know
spell it.
and he can say it and spell it and knows exactly where it is, and there are a lot of guests that have a lot of knowledge and then
That's interesting.
And then I think the connection to being able to we talked about social media, but also just the ability to hold things on your phone. So the idea is I had this wine.
Right.
Do you have this wine? Like that idea.
So part of that answer is social media not evolved, but developed in 10 years that had an incredibly
technology, social
good
media,
effect.
yeah, all that is absolutely. And I think we care more about what we eat and drink more than I think ever. I think now we really, really care about where our food comes from. We care about where our wine comes from, and I think we also like to be able to say we know this grape, we know this wine, we know this. So what producer can you show me that does something like this?
Right. So, I mean, just tell me your feelings quickly about the natural wine movement.
It's funny if you'd asked me 3 or 4 months ago. I know this has been a hot button topic for a while.
It's been
for a long time
on different levels,
and I think
with
I
different
purposely avoided it for my entire time until the last 3 or 4 months. And I think in some ways it's just been a discussion that it doesn't seem to be ending, and I not necessarily think it should. But I think I always my stock answer for the longest time was if the wine is good, then I don't, it doesn't bother me. But then I've talked to a lot of close friends of mine, and I'm starting to kind of come over to the side where I feel like it's more than just the wine tasting good. I think in some ways it can't be flawed. I think that's the easy answer.
Right.
And there are a lot of flawed wines out there, whether they're conventional or not.
Well, the perception and the reality is there's
Right.
more flawed natural wines than other wines.
And I'll be honest, I feel like in some ways that is the case more often than not. But man, when those natural wines are good, Caleb Ganser, a good friend of mine, I think this is what really woke me up over a couple months ago. We were talking, and he said there's something to the effect of there's something alive within these bottles.
That's definitely what
I love that idea, the idea that there's something electric, there's something alive. And so when I go back to tasting those wines and I go, oh yeah, that there's something, and not every bottle tastes the same. And so, people that are hoping for consistency may not get it all the time, but within those bottles, there's something alive.
I think you're right about that.
So I think it's a good thing. I again think I hope that the idea that sustainability and being it, like I said earlier, we care about what are we go.
Right.
miles
You
on
obsess
miles
over
to
your
go to
food,
you're
and
going
you-
to farmers markets
right.
instead of going around
And
the
you
corner of the
drink
grocery
mega
store.
purple wine or something.
Absolutely,
You know,
yeah.
it's funny.
So I think people care, and wine always follows food, and so the idea is that people are starting to care more and more about wine, and I get those questions often.
Yeah, I just wanted to get your take on it.
Yeah.
It's funny, a few minutes ago, one of the things you said that have changed is wine knowledge of the customer.
Mm-hmm.
You know, and you're like a som. Why are people still intimidated by soms? I guess you
Right.
don't feel that way and you don't act that way, but I
Yeah.
guess within the cadre of soms,
Because I think there are Psalms out there that, I mean, it's a problem. There are still Psalms out there that do intimidate.
So a couple of bad apples.
With every Psalm that's ever worked under me, I have to pull them aside at some point and say, like, you realize you were talking for yourself as opposed to talking for the guest. And that, for me, is an old Madison Park thing. I mean, I learned that, and I've been trying to transfer it over to every experience I have. I think there are a lot of times where we have built up a certain amount of knowledge that when somebody comes in and says, I mean, I get it almost every night, I like Cabernet Sauvignon and I like Pinot Noir. Well, those two really can't be any further from each
Right.
other in a lot of ways. But my job is to find out what you mean by that,
Right.
as opposed to defining you as someone who doesn't know about wine. And so
or
if-
your preference.
Right. And I still, to this day, as much as I think we've gotten closer to being hospitality driven and caring for our guests, and I think in some ways there's still an issue with, people feeling like, well, you don't really know what you're talking about wine, so I'm going to, talk down to you. And so I think some guests feel that way. There's also the idea, and I think this isn't as big of a problem as it used to be, but price gouging I think is an issue. I tell people all the time, the easiest thing you can tell me at a table, like the best thing you can tell me, is where do you want to stay with it? You give me a range, I
Right.
can work with it
Right.
easily, and I'm not going to go outside that range.
Even at Babbo, Del Posto,
Absolutely.
Danielle, you probably have more gems in certain ranges
Oh,
than
for
most
sure.
places.
For
So,
sure,
I mean,
especially in Italy.
It's like yeah.
especially in Italy.
All right, so let's just talk about the elephant in the room for a second. And I don't want to get into any gory details, but you've been working with Bastianich and Mario Batali for years.
Yep.
Has the Mario Batali story, and we won't get into that,
Yeah.
affected you?
I think, it affected the company over the last year, and
Which hasn't
affecting
affected-
me. It affected me for sure. I mean, that was, part of the reason of me heading over to Babbo. I think in some ways it affected us for better because it made us work harder. I think in some ways we go, okay, well, Babbo's been an institution for 20 years. We had lines out the door at, we would open at 5 o'clock. We had lines out the door
Right.
at 4. That's not necessarily the case anymore. We're still packed. We're still busy. But now, one thing that I've worked hard over the last year of being there is we now can't say no. We have to say yes.
Right.
And when we have to say no to someone, we have to make them think we're saying yes.
Right.
Because for us, it now needs to be, you can't just rely on good food. I tell that to our staff every night. You can't, Babbo's food's insanely good. Like the food is,
It's
the
always
reason why it's
been
been in, it's always been good.
Right.
It's always been consistent.
And a 20-year-old restaurant isn't going to have lines out the door. The fact that it's still open 20 years later
right, exactly.
is a big freaking
and,
deal.
there are only a handful out there. And,
Yeah.
and so we need, I think in some ways, like it made us work harder and figure out what the next generation of Bastianich's restaurants are. And
People
so we're
come
still
in
figuring
ever
it out.
and give you crap. Like,
Yeah.
why would they do from time?
Every once in a while, people ask the questions. People want to know what we know, and to be honest, we don't know much. Like,
Right.
we know as much as most people know if they're following the story.
Sure,
but
they
in
keep
the
it
long
from you
run,
for the right reason.
right? And in the long run, we're really focusing on just trying to make sure that the restaurants still put out the same quality of service and dining experiences as we have for 20 years.
All right, let's talk about wines for a couple of minutes. So, you obviously have a true love for Italian wines.
Yeah.
I think I picked up that you have some interest in Spanish wines. And you brought an interesting wine in. Talk to me about regions or winemakers, wines that
Sure.
are exciting you.
Yeah,
It could be old school barrel. What should we be looking for? What are you drinking?
I mean, I think anybody that's worked with me for the last 3 years probably is tired of me saying this, and I know it's also quite popular. But I mean, I
haven't heard it, so
I'm
tell
a
me.
you've heard it too because you probably heard from other people. But Etna for me is like the region, and I know it's starting to become like the nauseating thing everyone says. But
For
it
how
really is.
long? Has it been 2, 3, 4 years?
Oh, I think that it's been the hot.
Hot.
Yeah. Yeah, maybe 3 or 4, maybe
Okay.
5 years. I think we're now getting into a place. If you knew 3 or 4 years ago how hot it was, and you started buying up then,
I know.
we're now starting to get to a cusp where I think, in the way that Burgundy and Barolo does, the prices are going to start to skyrocket. And there's not, and like Burgundy, there's not enough out there. And so I think in some ways, those wines, the
Give
whites.
me a couple of makers. Give me.
I mean, my kind of there. I have a lot for a lot of different reasons, but my first love of Etna was definitely Benanti.
Benanti.
Correct.
Very good
And then I can
producer.
give you a list of other ones that I'm obsessed with.
Benanti makes good value.
I think he
wines,
makes some of the
price
most balanced, most ageable.
and not crazy pricey on some of them.
They weren't when I first started. They're,
Well,
they're
everything went
getting there. But again, I still think we're in a place where
What's the wow producer? You know, who's making?
I mean,
incredible
I
wines
definitely
that
think Benanti's up there. I
Okay.
think
Who else?
Girolamo Russo.
Wait, slow down and say that.
Girolamo Russo. So
Giralamo.
Girolamo. Yeah,
Girolamo.
Yeah, Girolamo.
Okay.
Russo, and then Gracci.
Graci.
Correct.
Okay.
Golfi, who makes both
Spell.
Gulfi.
These are all great Etna producers.
And Golfi also makes some great Nerdavla and Frappatos down in the southern
Okay.
part.
So the
mean-
predominant wine in the Etna wines is
The problem with grape is
Grape, I meant. I'm sorry.
Nerilla Muscalese,
Right.
And then usually Nerilla Cappuccio,
right.
and then the whites. Because I think we talk a lot about the reds, but I'll be honest, I actually get a lot more excited about the whites in some ways. I think the whites have shown how well they age. The reds are still kind of up for discussion.
Really?
I think I've had some really great
What are the
old
predominant
reds.
white grapes?
Caricante.
Caricante.
And I always kind of like lean towards Caricante as being some of the best ones, especially on the, let's say, eastern slope of Etna. Caricante 100%, but you'll see
And highly ageable.
highly ageable. I mean, for me, I think they
Caricante.
come off, the minerality, the kind of like honeyed notes you get when you age. I think they're very much in a Chablis kind of world.
Really?
They're fat.
Now,
they're
are
fantastic.
the makers that we mentioned also making
All making
good
whites.
Caracantes?
Mhm, yep.
So any of the people, Gracci,
For sure.
Benanti,
Yep.
they're making good Caracantes.
Absolutely. And the beauty of Etna for me also is that it does have a very Burgundy feel to it. I think everyone talks about it, flavor
Yeah,
profile, which
I've heard that.
I think is good. But for me also just the idea of the contrada, which is basically kind of like the Burgundy kind of like cru system,
Right.
or the kind of small areas where they grow. And I was talking to Benanti a couple months ago and talking about that's where I think the next level of Etna grows is a real definition of what these contradas do. So like Girolamo Russo does Fiuto di Mezzo, which I think tend to kind of bring off a little bit more of a riper style of Etnas, where in Benanti, their Serra della Contessa is just really kind of like more mineral driven and like you get that volcanic minerality. But then the white, and I think I don't mean to put the reds down, I think they age well, and I'm curious to see how much better they get made to age well, but the whites are showing now. It's
Crazy.
I think the
It's
best.
usually the opposite.
I do. I mean, I've been saying this for years, but I think the best white wine coming out of all of Italy is Pietro Marina from Benanti, and I think those
Pietro
wines
Marino is the maker.
is the bottling. So
The bottling.
Pietro Marina. It's from a little area called Milo, which is the only area you can do Etna Superiore, and it is like the best site for it.
Nice. Give me another region that's floating your boat. Is it
Sure.
Spain or?
I mean, I do. I sold.
But don't stick to that.
Yeah, no, I love
What's
Spain.
interesting you right now?
I love Spain, absolutely. I was lucky enough that during La Serena's tenure, we started doing a tapas side of the restaurant. So the bar was tapas and the dining room was Italian, and so we were able to bring on Spanish wines, and my mind just exploded. I think Italy and Spain have a lot in common in terms of wine regions that have been around for so long that went through such despair, and then really built themselves back up with great indigenous varieties. They played a lot with international varieties for a long time, and I think there are good wines out there that do that. But for the most part now, they're really figuring out what their indigenous varieties are doing. So for me, like I love, in Spain, I like Godeo was something when I was at La Serena, I was obsessed with, and still am for that matter.
That's the maker?
That's the grape. So Godello, Godeo.
Oh, Godeo.
Rafael Palacios does a great one.
Right.
Valdecel does a fantastic one as well. And so this is in the kind of the north western part of Spain. So close to like Galicia, where you see Albarino.
So it's Galicia.
It's
around.
You see it in like Valderas and
Right.
sometimes in Bierzo, but basically in that area,
Right.
where you get the kind of lush green area.
That area is exciting. Yeah.
Albarino, obsessed with as well.
As a
I think
white.
that, man, that's I think one of the most versatile grapes and some of the most
Good food
underappreciated
grape.
grapes. Oh, fantastic, fantastic. The city's
Do you have
beautiful.
a maker, Albarino?
Yeah. Let's see. Well, one that I'm obsessed with now. I was pouring it by the glass for a while at La Serena, and I just recently saw it somewhere. Oh, I saw it at Manhattan. They're pouring it by the glass now. Is
Michael.
a non-claris. So Nanclares, and they're dandelion bottling, which weirdly, I wouldn't say is the best interpretation of. It is Albarino.
Right.
I wouldn't say it's the best interpretation of what Albarino is, but the wine is insanely good. It actually for me comes off a little bit more like Riesling-esque. There's a
Really?
a slight residual sugar quality, but the acid's still there, so it's not
Interesting
cloying.
for Albarino.
It is incredible, and this is a producer who I was really kind of trying to figure out why the RS level is there, and reached out to a few people and figured out that he didn't want to add. He didn't want to add, inoculate yeast, so he basically just stops the fermentation process, adds a little bit of sulfur, and so it left over a little bit of residual sugar, and the wine is outstanding.
Wow. Got to look out for this.
Standard kind of Albarinos that I think are really, really great, like Do Ferrero is kind of a classic. Do Ferrero and like kind of everything that Do Ferrero does, or various other bottlings.
Spell that for me.
D-O space F-E, I'm going to mangle this,
R-R-E-R?
Ferriero, I
Oh,
think.
I got
Ferrero.
it. I'll double check it. As I tell everyone, we'll post, all the wines we're
Sure.
talking about and the wine
Fantastic,
list and
yeah.
all of that.
But I mean, that's the thing, is there are so many producers of Albarino right now, because they're really starting to figure out that grape's amazing.
I think it's underappreciated.
Absolutely. And then on the red side for Spain, it's been popular for a while, but I think they're finding different areas of Spain now where it works. But Garnacha, you think of Grenache in France, and you think of Cananao in Italy, but that is where the grape came from, was Spain. And they're
Right.
starting to figure out they have incredible old vine Garnacha all throughout Spain that are making some really outstanding wines.
So pretty much Garnacha as a category in Spain is a good play.
For sure, yeah.
Right, those are all good recos. We're talking to Scott Woltz. Scott Woltz is the wine director at Babbo. We're going to take a quick break, but when we come back, I want to talk to Scott about the wine program at Babbo. I want to subject him to our wine list. And Scott brought in a Aglianico del Volturi.
Mm-hmm.
You're listening to The Grape Nation. I'm Sam Ben Ruby. We'll be right back.
This episode is brought to you by Chai Pani Restaurant Group. From Bombay to Buncombe and Asheville to Atlanta, Chai Pani has extended the love of food, culinary experience, and storytelling to the Southeast. Founded by Meherwani and Molly Irani, Chai Pani Restaurant Group includes 2 locations of Chai Pani, plus MG Road Bar and Lounge, Botiwala, Buxton Hall Barbecue, and their new spice company, Spicewala. Learn more about Chai Pani and watch their documentary series, Cutting Chai, at chaipanirestaurantgroup.com. That's CHAIPANI restaurantgroup.com.
All right, we're back. We're back with my guest, Scott Woltz. Scott is the wine director at Babbo. Babbo is truly an institution in New York for a lot of reasons. So I want to talk to you about the wine program. So let's start off with the obvious stuff. It's a huge seller. How many selections are we talking about here? Or bottles? Or
Yeah, we got.
people love to hear that.
So we're
stuff.
lucky enough to have an off-site space too. So we have about 11,000 bottles in our cellar. In the range of like 2,500, 2,700 selections, and then another 24,000 bottles in Jersey, and that's, I feel like in some ways that's like most of my job is making sure that gets, the cellar and the list stay full with me kind of pulling 3 bottles and sending 3 bottles, and
both are Babbo owned, Babbo cellar, right?
Yep.
I mean, those
absolutely, yeah.
That's as big as anywhere, right?
It is. It's huge. I mean, the first time I saw it, I was like, I'm going to handle it. I was like a kid in a candy store, and then it's also intimidating because there aren't many restaurants out there that have been working on building a cellar for 20 years.
Which is, that's part of it. The answer to this question is obvious, but you have to kind of explain it away.
Sure.
What is the strength of the list? Italian.
Oh, for sure. Yeah.
Let's dig into where that goes.
With the exception of champagne, it's 100% Italian.
And a very large champagne list, so people know.
I think it's the most, I say this all the time, people roll their eyes, but it's the most underappreciated champagne list between
agree.
Babbo and Del Posto. Like the price point, it was something that Jeff Porter started, years ago, that we wanted to have the most, because we want people to order champagne. Right. And I think a lot of restaurants do that, but they've
done it in the last 3, 5, 7 years. Yeah. A lot of Italian restaurants go heavy champagne.
Right.
Marta, Mylene.
Absolutely. And the idea is that we want to put it at a price point.
Bigger than
and at a price point you can't beat.
All right, so strong champagne on the Italian.
For sure. So, always going to be Piedmont and Tuscany are your biggest 2 regions.
Which is one bigger than the other?
Piedmont, probably, yeah.
And we take a little break on the wine list there. If you were asked Nebbiolo or Sangiovese and you had to pick one, or you're going to some gulag in Siberia, and I don't have a lot of time. So
I'm not going to give you a straight answer, but I'm going to give you a good answer. So I think Nebbiolo for that amazing experience when it hits. There's nothing, and I'll argue with my Francophile friends, there's nothing that beats Nebbiolo.
Okay.
I think
so that's the one you'll
hits.
push out first if you had to represent.
But consistency and in, day out drinking, Sangiovese.
Okay. So, we talked about this existing wine list, off-site, on-site. You've been there not that long. What touches have you put on the list? Or is it the type of, are you bringing more Etna stuff in? Or
Absolutely.
Okay. What else?
To probably a nauseating point of
okay.
Although, again, I think the beauty, not to go back and rehash this, but the beauty of Etna also is that it is incredibly friendly. It's the grape. One thing I think Sam's always worry about is somebody sending a wine back. You can't hate Etna wines. For the most part, you really, really can't hate them. People can be turned off by Sangiovese and Nebbiolo based on structure and tannins and whatever it might be.
Sure.
Etna's so easily drinkable in the way that Pinot and Beaujolais are that it's really hard to decline that and say no. So someone who knows nothing about wine but wants something light and refreshing and is great. But then there's also this such great complexity to those wines that I think that also allows for people who really are focused on what wine brings and those kind of earthy characteristics.
So that's one thing.
So definitely,
anything.
I am very much in I started Serena and I did here because I think my predecessors were very good about building a Piedmont and Tuscan list. Especially my predecessor before me was very good about building up Chianti, right. Because I think it's an underappreciated region, and he very much did as well. I'm starting to figure out where the holes are for indigenous varieties that aren't as sought after.
Give me a filled hole or two.
Right. So wines like Rossese or Cesanese or
from where?
So like Cesanese from Lazio. Perfect example right now where we started doing a regional traditional tasting menu, and so the beauty of that is every month or every 6 weeks we're trying to find a different region that is underappreciated. So right now we're doing Lazio. And, in some ways there's an understanding why Lazio wines are hard to find because there are not a lot good out there, but there are some really excellent ones. And so, I started kind of digging into that. It allows me to realize what part holes we might be having. So Lazio is very much one of them. I think Calabria has some really fun wines. There are parts of Sicily away from Etna that I think are really, really cool.
And these are things that were not on the list or not heavily represented.
Yeah,
you're pushing
we
it.
Did a good job of making sure every region was
right.
represented, but I'm trying to build it up a little bit more and saying there are other producers besides this one or two. So, And then I think the northern part, I love like wines from Valdosta. I think wines from Lombardia are fantastic. You can really get some amazing Nebbiolo. They are called Chiavanesca, but that maybe a little bit more accessible at an earlier age. They don't show as much kind of like that tannic bite that like young Barolo might, but still show like beautiful acidity and those kind of like bright red fruits and those, secondary notes that you get in Nebbiolo without having to worry about somebody going, this is too much for my palate.
Right. Good to know. Don't Mario and Joe make Friulian wines?
Friuli wines, definitely. That's always going to be a region that we push hard, and I think really kind of the first evolution of white wines in Italy, like really great white wines in Italy, really came from that area, and they do fantastic wines, and some of the best producers of all white wine, and some really great red wines, but some of the best white wines in Italy are all coming from Friuli.
Nice. All right, last Babbo wine list question. You got 30,000, 40,000 bottles of wine.
Sure.
Off and on site.
Yeah.
The restaurant's 2 stories, isn't it? Or is it
3 stories?
3 stories.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
So you got people helping you there? You got
do.
a staff there?
Thank God I have people helping me. I'd be in trouble if I didn't.
So you're up and down.
Yeah, we have
besides up and down to the wine,
you're
up and down floors. So you have a som crew of what?
We have a team of 4 strong. Well, we have a team of 4 strong soms, and basically a som on each floor every night, not including me. And then on busy nights, we'll even have 3 soms. I mean, we really are a wine destination restaurant.
People come there for the depth of the list as much.
I'm surprised. I say this to my other som friends all the time, but there are places all over the country that people will like order, they'll order a plane ticket to fly to.
Oh,
I think a perfect example is like Burns is in Tampa.
Well, yeah, I mean, it's sort of for New York, it's a mini Burns.
Because they haven't like changed the price point of their wine. But we have that right here in New York, in Italy, and I think it's because we're all Italian, people kind of forget about it. But there are crazy price points on our list. We call them kind of Easter eggs, 20 or so wines where we just mark completely down so that if you're willing to take a little time with the wine list and find it, you're going to find some amazing deals. And that's
give me one Easter egg if you could remember. Gotta pick one where you got a couple of cases.
All right, I'll give you the most popular one because I think it's starting to kind of pick up. But the 01 Sassicaia right now is like $250 on the list.
Which is incredible. I mean, that's about what you would pay.
Yeah. I think my favorite one right now is Soldera 98. I'll hold off on saying the price. But Soldera 98 right now.
People know Soldera, but availability is one thing.
Yeah.
If you want it, you know what it's going to cost. You're willing to pay the fact that you have it.
It stems from Joe and David Lynch and all my predecessors who were smart enough to go, this is the first time I've ever been a buyer for wine that I'm never going to taste.
Very cool.
I buy wine, we send it off to Jersey, and I'm never going to taste it unless I'm here for the next 5 or 6 years.
Right. You'll get to it.
Yeah, I hope.
All right, Scott, we're going to morph to our wine list.
Sounds good.
Wine list is a question, 5 questions. Same questions we ask everybody each week. Don't obsess on these. Give me your best answers. We will post this on our social media. Take it anywhere you want. So the first question is, what are you drinking now? What are you drinking for you? What are you drinking for the restaurant? What's in your fridge? What's on the table? What's your current obsession?
Sure.
Give me a couple of things.
I think right now, drinking for the restaurant is focusing on that Lazio menu, so I'm probably drinking, I'd say Cesanese.
Okay.
And then on the white side, they do a lot more. I mean, they're known for Frascati, which is known for as an easy drinking kind of throwaway wine, but I think they're making some pretty good ones. And then there are a couple of producers that are making like international varieties. We just picked up like a Viognier that is outstanding.
From where?
Casale di Giglio.
Okay.
And I was like blown away by that, and it's the price point is really great, and so I lean away towards international varieties unless they're really like blow me away, and this one really did. But the Cesanese I think is a really fun one.
Now give me a Cesanese maker.
Cioli, so Cioli.
Cioli.
Yeah,
Cioli.
Yeah, Damiano.
Okay. All right, that's a good one. All right, do you have? This is the silliest question on the list. Do you have a favorite wine and food pairing? Is there something you've done more than a bunch of times, and when you do it, you go, "Oh wow"? And we have a Grape Nation rule: you can't say oysters and champagne.
Okay. I mean, it's champagne's tough, and it really is.
Champagne and anything.
Such an
But
easy,
you could say champagne and something else.
Let's see, favorite pairing right now. I mean, it's funny.
You
My
could say-
wife is. I always tell those people my wife doesn't know much about wine at all. She'll be the first person to tell you that. And yet, when I throw something together, I'm always like, "Hey, taste this and let me know if it works." And she, I feel like in some ways has a better palate than I do. And I opened a bottle for New Year's of Eagle Ourier, and she made some popcorn and just threw it together, and I was like, "What is this?" So yeah, I mean, champagne and popcorn. Yeah, I think that for me is something that I will.
So Eagle Ourier is a champagne producer,
Yeah.
and popcorn, the salt,
The salt, the buttery kind
Yeah.
of character, the roundness of the Eagle Ourier, because those are big champagnes. Like there was something that just worked that night, and again, it wasn't something I pulled out; she pulled it out.
Just so you know, every now and then we get a wine and food pairing that nobody else says.
Yeah.
A couple people have said champagne and popcorn.
Yeah.
Which is good.
Yeah.
Because it's
There's a
kind of
consistency,
obvious.
yeah.
You're not.
I mean, it's
not like you're
popcorn for sure. Like the
gotta be
classic is
good
fried
popcorn,
food.
though.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean,
fried chicken and.
I can go back to the Chesnese because right now I'm loving a dish that my chef is doing that's basically like an egg crepe wrapped around like meat, and it has like a delicacy and yet a heartiness.
Yeah.
And weirdly, the Chesnese works so well with it because although it's slightly lighter, there's a peppery note to it, and the delicacy of the wine works with the egg, but the fruit works with the meat, and it's outstanding. So
Sounds good.
that's something that works well.
All right, your favorite wine restaurant and our bar. People out there that are doing it well, doing it right, and I said restaurant and or bar.
Yeah.
I realize when I ask people this, sometimes you get nervous that you're leaving people out. Or
Right.
whatever.
No,
but
no.
someplace that is comfortable for you.
I mean,
that's
I'm sure this has been an answer you've heard often because it is like the kind of the go-to spot. But Compagnie is just
A lot.
It is, and it also I think answering the question is a little bit like, well, what are you looking for? So for me, like if I'm looking for a spot where I hope to see my other wine friends, I'm going to go to Compagnie because they're going to show up
Right.
there.
At 11, 12 o'clock.
Like
pop
Caleb
bottles.
and Theo and that team really does
Agree.
an amazing
and
job.
It comes up. I think in 2018 we did awards for 2017, and in that category, Company was one of them. Any other place?
I think so. Weirdly enough, because I'm such a niche Italian-focused restaurant, when I go out, I almost always never drink Italy or Spain for that matter. But I'm always looking for a really good internationalist, and I think by far the best internationalist in the restaurant. I don't even have a close second is the Modern. I think Michael Engelman's list right now is insane and has been for years. And
He's a whiz for sure.
Man, that list
really
is
is
crazy.
terrific.
Like, where can you go where you're getting Australia, South Africa, and then the classic French, really Italian. And it's not just like classic producers. You're putting a list together to have great names. He's bringing out names that no one knows of.
I know.
And
He spent
putting
some
on a
time
list.
in Australia too.
It is,
so he knows that.
it is. It's so.
I agree with you, and other people do too, because they've mentioned that, and he deserves all the kudos. Do you have a favorite all-time wine or two? And I always say it's not the most expensive, it's not the rarest. A lot of times it goes back to the experience. Like my wife and I, when we got engaged, we had a bottle of sangria, blah, blah, blah.
Sure.
But what, can you think of things that...
I can, yeah. I mean, I the kind of aha wine, if you will, and I always think this is, it's almost always more experience than it is with the wine. If I had the wine the next day, it wouldn't be as good because it was who I was with. And
Right.
I was with a group of guys.
Which shows you that's an important part of the whole
Absolutely.
wine experience.
Exactly. And
All right, so what
for me,
is
that's a
it?
focus. I have a good friend of mine named John Ross, who is now a master sommelier. At the time, he was working with me at 11 Madison.
He just got married.
There's a group he did with Jane.
Is he in Australia?
Yeah, him and Jane are both in Australia.
Right.
They're both
Okay.
some of my favorite people, and really
Both
along with Dustin,
the Somm TV show.
they both were in the Somm TV show.
Right,
Yeah,
right,
they
right.
and along with Dustin, it
Right.
really did push my love for wine. So I ate with him and a few other guys. We had this kind of like yearly thing where we go to 11 Madison Park and eat. And the first year that we went there, he did his birth year.
Wait, where'd you go to?
11 Madison.
11
and so we ate there, and he decided to do his birth year. Clos Saint Hune, so VT. So we did a Trimbach Clos Saint Hune VT, and it was when people ask me what my favorite wine is, I'm kind of like other Soms. I'd probably say Riesling. Every Riesling I drink to this day, I still think, can it do what that did?
What did you give me the vintage year?
1983.
Close
Yeah,
thing,
close 18, which is a classic. Now, I'd say to give you one more answer, and more recently, I'm obsessed. I have been for a long time with Stella de Campalto, who is a Brunello producer. She's amazing.
I kind of stumbled on that a year or two ago.
So I
think John Patterson at Frank's has a lot of it.
John's got this. I know. I just recently saw John has this wine on his list because I was at Frankie's the other day.
Not crazy price either.
Her Brunellos get up there because they're such small production, but this wine's actually lesser. It's actually a Super Tuscan, and it's called Col Tempo Bella. Col Tempo basically in Italian
means... This is by Stella di Campalto?
So this is like the second. Col Tempo. So CHOL, Tempo, TEMPO. And then Bella is the second part. It's a non-vintage bottling. It's a experimental plot that she's doing 4 grapes that you've never heard of before. Lagrigne, Tannat, Marcelin, which is a Bordeaux crossing, and then another Bordeaux crossing. But the wine is insane. It's like Brunello meets Bordeaux, and yet there's an elegance to it. You would think these 4 grapes usually come off either tannic or inky or over extracted, and she somehow puts together one of the most beautiful wines, and it's less than her Brunellos, and it's a very small production.
That's why we do this show. So guys like you can unleash.
Please find that wine.
Like
I had it for my birthday, and I haven't been able to stop thinking about it since.
All right, last question, and I think you can handle this well. Give me your best wine for around $15-20 retail. Give me a red, give me a white.
Okay.
I'm sending my 20-something kids to a party. Yeah. Don't send them with a crappy $9 bottle of wine, and they certainly don't have 40. So what are they buying? What red,
15,
white?
20. Okay.
You could give me Airy. You could say
I got
Muscadet for white.
Yeah, a white for me. I'm going to stick to Italy. One that was my favorite, still is one of my favorites for that price point is Andre Felici. So Felici, I believe, and this is from the Marche, specifically Castello di Jesi. Region we didn't really talk about, but one of the best grapes along with Sicily in terms of making white wine. It's Verdicchio. So Verdicchio to Castello di Jesi.
Good
and
one.
So
give me a red.
That's like going to range in the 15-20 range.
Right there.
Red, I would say, let's hop back over to Spain. I mean, I think some of those Tempranillos, the younger kind of Crianzas, like I want to say like La Rioja Alta's like entry level bottling is going to be in that range, and those are classic Tempranillos, showing those kind of like classic kind of sweet and sour,
so Spanish
coconut
Tempranillo, Crianza.
Dried red fruits.
Don't they use American oak, those guys?
They do. Yeah, that's where you get kind of that coconut dill
and all that.
Yeah,
coconut,
so I mean,
right?
if you're ever trying to taste, like we talk about blind tasting a lot, if you're ever trying to taste wines that are like classic Tempranillo, like La Rioja Alta and Lopez for me are the two just classics. But La Rioja Alta is usually at a lesser like price point and makes really, really excellent wine.
All right, so like I said, I'll post all of those. All right, Scott, we're going to wrap up the show, but we're not going to leave without tasting and evaluating some wine. So every week we taste a different wine on air for our weekly wine sip. I always ask my guests if they'd like to bring in a bottle. Scott brought in the 2015 Igni Aglianico del Veltore from the Basilicata region, which is in the south of Italy. Quickly, because we have about 3-4 minutes.
Okay.
Tell me about this wine.
Yeah, so this wine I'm super stoked about. I mean, it's going to sound somewhat like a shameless plug, but I wouldn't do it if the wine wasn't amazing. So this wine is being made by 2 really great somms. So we have Jeff Porter, who we talked about earlier. It was up until about last month the head of all the Bastianich restaurants. And now he's kind of out doing his own thing, and this is one of the things. And he's paired up with Shelley Lindgren, who's on the West Coast. So really for me, I don't know 2 more wine-focused, Italian wine-focused wine people, aficionados, if you will, in the country. And they've paired up the East Coast, West Coast version of it's almost like like Tupac and Biggie decided to like bash forget their rap battle and make wine. And the wine is insanely good.
So it's an Aglianico grape.
So, Aglianico, you see more in Campania, and this is actually in Basilicata. So
which is central south.
Yeah, basically the heart of the southern part of Italy. So most people know Aglianico from Campania and specifically Terrassi. Here you get on Aglianico, so del Voltore, basically meaning vulture. They they're it's up on a extinct volcano, and you have these like 7 different like valleys and peaks that form what looks like a vulture. But what you get is really old, like hardened, like volcanic rocky soils, and they're also high up. So what a lot of people know Alianico as is kind of deep, extracted. Like it's really kind of that transition from the California wine movement a little bit, where you got like these deep, like oak-driven style wines. Well, now we're seeing Alianico specifically in Basilicata, which are light and floral, and the alcohol levels are getting lower, and the brightness is there, and it's I'd drink this all day long. This is a day drinking wine.
Let's evaluate it. Let's give it a sniff and throw it over the tongue. So color, it's kind of a deep ruby garnet, right?
Deep ruby, absolutely.
Beautiful color, clear. Give me your nose descriptors.
Sure. So you get, I think one thing that, not to pass up on the fruit side, but one thing that like stands out to me right away is that kind of like smoky, volcanic, ashy character. But
I get grilled herbs from the smoke.
You get kind of like darker red fruits, darker
definitely
black fruits.
Red fruits.
Yeah, definitely more in the red fruits. Alianico tends to show more black. You think of Alianico, and the kind of general way of saying it is it's like the Barolo of the South. It usually has that structure of Barolo. Here, I think tends to be a little bit lighter on its feet, a little bit brighter, a little bit more floral. Whereas in Campagna, you get a little bit more darker, a little more.
What about mouthfeel? Kind of a medium?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, on the higher end of medium.
Medium plus type thing?
Yeah, I would say I wouldn't go quite medium plus. I'd say like higher end of medium. I think, again, this is super easy to drink throughout the day.
And the palate reflects the nose, the red fruits. There's some
Absolutely.
minerality.
It's great minerality. A little bit of like a leather component there going.
For sure. What do we pair this with?
Lamb, I think, would be fantastic.
What else?
I think I'd step outside here of Roberta's and tear apart a pizza with this.
Anything, right?
Absolutely, yeah. This is an easy drinking wine.
So
but
we
at the
don't
same
like
time,
this wine. We love this wine.
Yeah, I love this wine.
And it retails for about $29-$30.
Yeah,
right?
you can get
so
it in that range right now.
Point.
Yeah, and this is the first bottling that they're going to do, but they're going to do other volcanic
because
wines.
It's been in the bottle and barrel for almost 30,
Yeah, we didn't
total.
say this. So this comes from the Pizzini family, which is they make Grafalco wines, which are some of the best Alianico you'll see as well in Basilicata.
So it's the 2015 Igni Aglianico del Voltore from Basilicata. Scott, we got to wrap up the show.
Cool.
We just did an hour. If you have a question, suggestion, wine happening, or event, hit me up at samatthegrapenation.com. That's samatthegrapenation.com. Follow us on Facebook at The Grape Nation. Follow us on Instagram at SBenRuby and the hashtag The Grape Nation. On Twitter, we're at BenRuby. Also, subscribe to the Grape Nation podcast on iTunes, Stitcher, Spotify, and now Pandora. Like I said, we'll post Scott's wine list answers. We'll post the info on the weekly wine sip, and if I could sneak in some of the other wines we talked about, we'll put them on our social media sites. Scott, where can we find Scott and Babbo on social media if we want?
Yeah, Babbo you can find on Instagram. My handle on Instagram.
Yours is...
It's SCOWO.
SCO for Scott.
SCOWO photo, yeah. Okay.
SCOWO.
PHOTO.
Photo.
Yeah.
That's where you can find
You get to see a
Scott.
lot of nice bottles and a few baby shots.
There you go. All right. I want to thank our guest, Scott Woltz. Scott is the wine director at Babbo, downtown in the Village in New York City. Go down there and say hello to him if you want to get some killer wine and some killer food. Thanks to our engineers and everyone at the Heritage Radio Network. I'm Sam Ben-Ruby, and you've been listening to The Grape Nation.
Thanks for listening to Heritage Radio Network, food radio supported by you. For our freshest content and to learn more about our 10-year anniversary celebration happening all year long, subscribe to our newsletter. Enter your email at the bottom of our website, heritageradionetwork.org. Connect with us on Instagram and Twitter at heritage_radio. You can also find us at facebook.com, Heritage Radio Network. Heritage Radio Network is a nonprofit organization driving conversations to make the world a better, fairer, and more delicious place. And we couldn't do it without support from listeners like you. Want to be part of the world's most innovative community? Subscribe to the shows you like, tell your friends, and please join the HRN family and become a member. Thanks for listening.